Hey everybody, this is Jackie Luqman.
And I'm Shahi Luqman.
And this is Live in Luqman Nation. It is Wednesday, November, what's today, the 15th?
Yeah, 15th.
And we were scheduled to have Kali Akuno, who is the co-author of Jackson Rising, The Struggle for Economic Democracy and Black Self-Determination in Jackson, Mississippi, on tonight. But as is wont to happen sometimes, there are scheduling conflicts, there are last-minute emergencies, and he couldn't join us tonight. So,
and also we had our good friend Phil Waledo of the Virginia Defenders drop off our papers.
Yes.
Because we are, even though we distribute papers for the Virginia Defenders, we are members of the Virginia Defenders. Mm-hmm. And so, he was up in the area, coming all the way from Richmond, Virginia, coming up here. So we had to receive him, and he came. It's just one of those things where things intersect. Unlike some more famous folks on social media, we don't have interns, we don't have assistants.
Yeah, we don't have all that.
We carry the load. So we want to apologize for any inconveniences that this late stream is causing, but we will be brief. We're not going to keep you guys long, and we also welcome you and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, so one of the very first things we want to talk about, and let us know, you guys who are on, if we're having audio issues, because we're having some weird bandwidth issues. Yeah. So let us know if you can hear us okay. Let us know if you can see us okay. And if we have problems, we'll figure it out. But one of the very first things we want to talk about is this story of the most recent mass shooter.
We got another one. Yep.
Now, I can't show you the video because, like I said, we've got some audio issues going on. But apparently, and this just happened yesterday, a young white male started a shooting spree at home and took his guns to 7 different locations.
Wow.
One of which was an elementary school, and just shot up the school. And as of the latest count, I think there are 4 dead. And I'm trying to pull the article up now, so to make sure we have this right. But we just talked about this whole, we don't know what the media has said about this person other than they called him a gunman instead of a terrorist. Right. So we're reading, we're reading the headlines and we're listening to it and we're like, oh, he's white. Because he wasn't a terrorist, and he wasn't, his picture wasn't released immediately. So yeah, of course, what we suspected, this guy was actually shooting at the police vehicle. I'm reading this from the LA Times article. Was actually shooting at the police vehicle, back at the police. The officer rammed the vehicle, forced it off the road, and in an exchange of gunfire, they finally shot the person. 5 people, my mistake, 5 people were dead, including the gunman, and at least 10 were wounded. The violence began just before 8 a.m. when officers received reports of a man down at a location where this guy killed a man and a female neighbor he'd had an ongoing feud with.
Well, they found his wife dead, too.
They found his wife dead. He had been arrested before for attacking his female neighbor.
Right.
During a dispute in January. The dispute with the neighbors that this guy had before had sparked violence in the past. So the motive, from what they could tell, was this guy initially getting going on a rampage against his neighbors, getting back at his neighbors. And then he went on a rampage. I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh, but I know this may seem unrelated, but humor me for a minute. P. Diddy just tweeted something, P. Diddy the rapper.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're like, what is she talking about? P. Diddy the rapper tweeted something the other day that said, Black people need to stop killing each other. We kill each other more than anybody else. We need to stop. Now, here we just talked about, what was it, Sunday last week, Wednesday or Sunday, over 300 mass shootings in this country. 307 mass shootings.
Now 308.
Now 308 mass shootings in this country this year. There were over 400 last year.
Right.
And while in that number of mass shootings, yes, some of those people certainly are gang members from cities like Chicago. Some of those mass shootings are included in that number. But to believe that most of the people who are committing these types of crimes are Black people is delusional. Especially whenever there's a shooting like this that's publicized nationally, who is it? It's white men. And listen, this is not we're not making excuses for Black people who kill each other. The idea, though, that Black people who commit crime in high poverty areas where we know that there's been a systematic isolation, plan of isolation and implementation of entrenched poverty and disenfranchisement, that is the same kind of crime that was the result of the same kinds of policies and that we celebrate when we watch movies like The Gangs of New York, right? Where you had European immigrants coming here at the turn of the century, and they were segregated in these teeming ghettos where they lived a lot of times with poor Black people who were the descendants of slaves. And there was European crime, there were European gangs, there was European, not a lot of people had guns back then, but there were European stabbings, there was European prostitution. All of that crime resulted from poverty, and the government knew that. So the government implemented programs to help Europeans deal with their problems that led to the type of crime they didn't want. But Black people didn't get that same assistance. We just got categorized as more criminal than anybody else, even though European immigrants were committing the same kind of crime. Everybody was committing. So there's that lack of historical understanding of where this demonization of Black people who commit crime or Black crime comes from in the first place, that makes the kind of statements that P. Diddy makes, that Black people kill each other more than any other group of people, not only ridiculous but dangerous. Because it does two things. It demonizes all Black people as if there's something like inherently wrong with us that's worse than other people. And it does three things, a few things, but it also paints an incorrect picture of Black people in general. Because most of us aren't running around killing each other.
No, I mean, and I'm sure P. Diddy knows that. But P. Diddy aside, because I'm going to get with him, I think that what we need to understand is that here you got another mass shooting committed by another white man. And the reason why these are so important, because there are certain mass shootings that that the media that we know from the media because they're so horrendous. So what I mean is that when you have Sandy Hook, you have the one down in the church in Texas and those type of things, mass shooting down there with the Black church. What I'm saying is that the country is being under attack by WhiSIS.
What's WhiSIS?
They need to call this. They need to start calling it for what it is. It's terrorism. Right. And the reason why I say it's under that we need to start saying that we are under attack by WhiSIS because the tactics are the same. If you look at these mass shootings, what has ISIS doing? Now, bear with me now.
Okay.
What is ISIS doing recently? They're attacking soft targets, or what we call soft targets, and a lot of them are carried out by what they call single attackers and stuff like that.
Right.
I don't see any difference from what the guy in New York done when he ran over the bikers,
Okay.
as opposed to the mass shootings that's done by white males that are still perpetrated by single individuals. That's why I call them WhiSIS. They're soft targets. If you got a guy who's driving a truck in New York and he's riding over bicyclists in New York, that's a soft target. You know, that's what they consider soft targets.
Okay.
An ISIS guy or somebody that's affiliated with ISIS or Islamic terrorism or something, and they're in Europe and they drive a truck into a crowd of people. Why do they do that? Because it's a soft target. It's no difference than a white guy going into church killing a bunch of worshipers. There's no difference than this guy today that goes down there, kill his wife, shoot 4 people. There's no different than the Sandy Hook. There's no different than Dylan Roof going in there killing 9 black people in the church. All of these things. But the problem of it is, and it goes back now to what you just mentioned earlier, about what we frame it as, what we call it.
Right.
So now all of a sudden it's like if somebody says, if someone with a Islamic name or Arabic background or whatever does that kind of crime, the first thing we say is, "Oh wow, look at this! You know, ISIS is targeting innocent civilians."
Right. These people have been radicalized.
Well, because it becomes politicized is what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that when it's done that way, then it becomes politicized. Trump gets on there and everybody calls for all this punishment, justice, and the guy should be fried and all this other kind of stuff because it's politicized.
Right.
What doesn't get politicized is when white men does the same thing that ISIS do.
Exactly.
Now, the P. Diddy thing, and we spoke about this yesterday, is that, first of all, I personally don't care what P. Diddy has to say on this issue. P. Diddy has made millions off of music that has perpetrated or perpetuated this type of antisocial behavior in our community. He perpetuated that. He still today hawks Ciroc and all this liquor and alcohol to our community, Cristal and all this other kind of stuff. He's the one that's known for what we call in the hip hop community of bling rap. This bling bling rap. P. Diddy was one of the main perpetrators of that. Now you done made your millions, P. Diddy, and now all of a sudden now black people need to stop killing each other. And I like what you said, Jackie, because see, this is once again we talk about what a certain behavior that is politicized. And just because P. Diddy is black doesn't mean that he hasn't ingested the same racialized ideas about. See, every time you say black, and we know this from countless of experiments that have been done. Me and you used to say, why is it that all the most dangerous animals and insects and stuff come from Africa? You know what I mean? Like the black striped ant. You know that touch you and you dissolve. Or something like that.
Everything in Africa is out to kill.
So, but we laugh at that, but it's also connected to the whole way that Africa, Africans, and African descendants, no matter where they are categorized.
Right.
So we look at P. Diddy, black man, who you would consider have some type of street cred through hip hop, but he is not. But he is still victimized, like a lot of us are, from the racialized ideas that we have. You know, you put black in it, and it's all of a sudden bad.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you say, well, black teenagers are they need to stop aborting all their babies, where the numbers don't back that up. Black kids need, like when you have all these mass shootings like Columbine and stuff. But then the politicizing of black young crime is when we have what they used to term the wolf packs.
Exactly.
And what was the other flash mob?
And the super predators.
And the super predators.
Don't forget that.
So we have to understand when something is politicized, and we have to understand when something isn't politicized. And so white male terrorism, and that's what we call it on Luqman Nation, WhiSIS. They're not politicized. It's still, again, making excuses for white male anger, no matter what it is, whether they label it mental illness, whether they label it this. What they don't label it as is terrorism, and that's what it should be.
Exactly, and I love what you said about the soft target, right? Because here's why I think that's very important. Because when we're looking at this this made up construct of black crime being worse than any other crime on the planet. When you have a situation like Chicago, right, or Baltimore, that some of the violence that happens, the gun violence specifically, we're talking about specifically gun violence,
right?
Understanding that all crime is intraracial, right? Because people, crime is opportunistic.
I mean, but we're segregated in this country.
Exactly.
So white folks, black people don't get a chance. And not that we're advocating that, but how often do black people run into white folks in their living spaces and commit this type of crime? How often do white folks venture out of their living space and come down here to Southeast and just knock off a bunch of black people?
See, that's not going to happen, because you got to put too much work and effort into going into another demographic group, into going into an area where another demographic lives in order to kill a bunch of people in that demographic. Right. So all crime is intraracial, meaning it happens within the race of that particular group of people. But when we're talking about, to put it in simple terms, white people kill white people, black people kill black people, Asian people kill Asian people. And everybody commits crime. But when we're talking about this made up thing called black crime, especially when we're looking at shooting deaths, black gun crime, when you're looking at instances of Chicago and the gun violence in Baltimore and the gun violence here in D.C., it is important to differentiate that from the kind of attacks, the kind of terrorism we're talking about with this latest terrorist attack by a white male. Why? Because of the targets. When you're talking about gun violence in black communities, in poor black communities, first of all, you're not even talking about most of the people who live in those communities. Let's just get that straight. We're talking about a very small percentile, not even a whole percentile of the entire community that commits these crimes. And most of the people who commit this gun crime, the police know about them. The police been knowing about them.
Right.
So that's one thing to take into consideration. The other thing to take into consideration is they're not targeting just random people like white people who commit gun crime, like what happened yesterday do. You don't have gang members just walking into a neighborhood, spraying a whole neighborhood full of people just because they're pissed off at their neighbor. They have a target. Now, again, this isn't excusing the crime. This is differentiating between why we're talking about white male terrorism and gun crime that happens among gang members who happen to be black or Latino. We're not talking about soft targets and people who are also involved with the criminals who just shot 3 people standing on the corner.
Right, and another difference that you get with that, while I talk about the politicizing of these certain incidences, is the fact that when you have ISIS or ISIS-inspired people commit something, then the government reacts.
Right.
Whether it's overreact, but they react. Whether it's, as we've seen recently with new visa restrictions or new recalls to build the wall, or or more restrictions at airports. There's always government response when it's some kind of what they call Islamic terrorism or ISIS terrorism. When you're dealing with black crime, there's always government response, and we've seen this with mass incarceration. We've seen this with gun restrictions in urban areas, more police. We see this. And when you come with this type of WhiSIS crime, you see lack of government response.
Exactly.
No one is calling for more gun control. No one is calling for this and that and the other when it comes to, even though you got over 300 incidences in 1 year, no one in government seems yet to have the will to go and say, well, we need to have stricter gun control. What we have, on the other hand, is the fact that the argument on that end is the fact that, well, guns don't kill people, people kill people. But they never say that when black people are shooting each other.
Exactly.
They never say that when some ISIS-inspired person is doing that. It's always that person is doing the killing. The black on black crime, which means black people are just going amok, running around just shooting everybody down, like Escape from New York. But and so now the political talk becomes, well, no, these are bad people who are murdering each other. But in these incidences, it's like, well, why do anything about the guns? Because it's not the guns. And then it's just like with the opioid epidemic that we're seeing. When white people are the victims, or when white people are the perpetrators, the whole talk becomes either compassion or it becomes reactory, or right. So the government is slow to respond, when it comes to white violence, and is slow to and is compassionate when it comes to white victimhood.
Right.
But when it comes to black perpetrators, it's punishment. When it comes to black victims, again, it's lack of compassion. And even when we talk about ISIS-inspired people of color that have committed anything that we considered violent, then there's no innocence. Drones, we've seen it with the drone strikes. We've seen it with the invasions of the American military. We've seen this with this overreaction in countries like Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria, where even those who don't have anything to do with the violence are, we just write them off as collateral damage.
Right.
And that seems to be easy when people, when the people are not white.
Yeah.
So again, that's where we have to, draw the line to the way that things are being perceived through the lenses of racial identity.
Exactly.
And that's the thing, is that through the lens of racial identity, this is how we put all of these things in different areas.
Right. Yeah. And when we look at the history of legislation, when we look at the history of black struggle, when we look at the history of white supremacy in this country, and everything you said, history bears it out. Like, we talked on this show year before last, excuse me, about the Ceasefire Program. And we will never stop talking about this program because the Ceasefire Program, I'll put the link to the ProPublica article up for you again so you can read it for yourself. The Ceasefire Program destroyed a few myths about black people and our communities and how we view crime in our communities. It destroyed the myth that black people don't care about crime in our community. Of course we do.
Yeah.
I mean, we tell you that all the time. We're always going to some community something, some church something, where we're talking about how do we deal with these pockets of crime in our neighborhoods. We're going to try to get our council member on here because he just introduced an initiative for this area, the Ward 8 area in D.C., an anti-violence initiative. So, I mean, we community members, religious community members, politicians, we do care about crime in our neighborhoods. So that the Ceasefire Program dispelled that myth. Then the Ceasefire Program dispelled the myth that we don't know how to deal with crime in our neighborhoods. Yes, we do, because the Ceasefire Program was successful in targeting the people that we know commit the crimes. Working with the police, that was another myth that was dispelled by the Ceasefire, that we don't want to work with the police. That's bull. Yes, we do. So this program proved successful in working with the police department in I think it was Boston, where I think it was started, and in some other cities, in reducing gun violence in high crime black communities. The people who created this program wanted to expand it, get funding to replicate it across the country. Took it to the White House, the Obama White House. Took it to the White House. Couldn't get funding for it. They were told that there was no political will for that type of thing. What type of thing? There was no political will to help people in a community that everybody says nobody cares about gun violence actually do something about gun violence? There's no political will for that? No. There's no political will to help black people do anything about gun violence. Because, see, we know that there's political will to address, at least there was, before the NRA became the behemoth, the political behemoth that it is. There was political will to stop white people from killing at least important white people, because the Brady Bill was passed, and it was a bipartisan effort. Do you remember that? I know that was before a lot of your time. But a federal gun control measure was passed back in the, what was that, 80s?
Yeah, it was in the 80s.
After,
Early 80s,
yeah,
after
Reagan
yeah.
was shot. So maybe for white people to actually do something, well, that's not true. I was about to say, well, maybe for white people to actually want to seriously address uniform measures of gun control issues that might be helpful in these types of instances, like stopping someone who has a history of domestic abuse and physical assault against anyone from owning a gun. And as a gun owner, that just makes sense to me. If I go out and beat our neighbor up and I have a record of an assault, yeah, my my right to carry a gun should, and it wasn't because it was in self-defense. I was found guilty. Why should I have a right? Why should anybody trust me with a gun? That makes no sense to me. I mean, that's just one of the common sense things.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of feel like, and this is where white people should be really angry, that the reason politicians don't have the will to address the common sense measures of gun control, not the stupid, we're going to take everybody's guns away BS, not the we need to delve into people's private medical records, because that's dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
That's sketchy. But have a serious conversation on the common sense efforts where we can come to just have the conversation. But the reason that doesn't seem to be happening is because somebody important enough hasn't been the victim yet.
Well, I also think that when we talk about the Brady Bill, you're talking
Mm-hmm.
about a time when the political climate was different.
Exactly. That's true too.
Yeah, I don't think that a Brady Bill would be passed today.
You're right.
You know,
You're right.
You had a different understanding in the Republican Party at the time. There was no Tea Party.
That's
and
true.
You didn't have this extreme right at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we even talked about that, how Republicans like Reagan and all of those who existed at the time would be rejected by the Republican Party today with the Tea Party element.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't even think that the Brady Bill would even be passed today. But you're right that not even having the conversation, the fact that we tied this into in previous shows about the lack of political will
Mm-hmm.
that Obama stated,
Mm-hmm.
the reason why there was a lack of political will to fund programs like Ceasefire or give any political support to urban activism that spearhead their efforts
Mm-hmm.
into reducing crime
Mm-hmm.
is the same way. And this was, I forgot who said this, but we had spoke about one of the activists that we know, but it'll come to me, who it was actually Dr. John Henry Clark. He was one of them who stated that until we understand the way that Africa is destabilized, and the reason Africa is destabilized, and the reason why there is a vested economic interest in keeping Africa destabilized, is then we understand that. Then we understand that the same reason why colonized areas in the United States,
Mm-hmm.
because see, that's why crime is mostly interracial here, because we're colonized.
Right.
So when you have colonized communities, you're talking about vested economic interest on why there is no political will.
Mm-hmm.
Why isn't there any political will? Because it served the purpose, because it serves someone's purpose,
Right.
or
Right.
or serves someone's interest, I should say, to keep it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Now we can all sit up here and talk about what those interests are, and I'm sure that there'll be numerous of examples we can come up. But for government to say that there's no political will to stop violence committed against American citizens says something of itself.
Right.
So again, we go back again. And so most of us, we look at the surface of all of this stuff. That's why you can get somebody like P. Diddy, and you can get black folks to get up there and say, well, Black Lives Matter. Then, we need to stop killing. Why is it that we don't kill each other? As if that has to be the standard to get government help. As if all of our problems within the black community have to be solved before government can come in and say, okay, now you guys are good enough we could come in and help you. So the argument is ridiculous. P. Diddy, and that's why we was talking about how we respected rap artists like Ice Cube and Ice-T and all of these other people, Snoop Dogg, who know that they've made their money off of perpetuating this antisocial behavior in the black community. That even though they don't indulge in that anymore, but they have not injected themselves into this debate because they realized what their origins were and how they started and how they got to where they are.
Exactly. And I had to write this down so I wouldn't forget it. The idea that this statement, if Black Lives Matter, then we need to stop killing each other. Let me tell you what white people don't ever do, and I hate to compare ourselves to white people. I just think that this is important to state. When you hear white people talking about government is too big, or I want less spending in entitlements, or I want the government to leave my gun rights alone, or I want the government to reflect a Christian worldview,
or I don't want a nanny state,
or I don't want a nanny state. You know what white people never ever say?
What?
To other white people, we can't demand any of those things that we want until we stop killing each other. And it's not because white people believe that they don't commit crime. That's ridiculous. There's an entire television network devoted basically to white people, how white people kill each other. It's called the ID Network.
And we also read in the history books when white people kill each other. World War I, World War II, War of 1812. We can go on and on
all over
and
the
on
place.
and on. Right.
One of my favorite shows was Forensic Files.
Right.
And mostly,
I mean, white crime, white violence. If you want to look at it, is it's unlike so-called black violence or black crime, which is kind of contained. Mm-hmm. You've never seen black violence where Europeans got involved and where where black and I'm going somewhere with this, but you never see where there's a conflict between the Bloods and the Crips, and then all of a sudden the Crips go in there and recruit their partners from Ukraine and all this stuff and come and help them fight this war.
Right.
But you have seen this in European wars, and where where the colonial powers went all the way and got people from India and the Caribbean and Africa, all the colonies they had to help them fight their squabbles that they didn't have anything to do with.
Right.
So so when we talk about these type of conflicts, when it comes to the so-called racialized violence that we always talk about, Chicago crime stays in Chicago. You know what I mean?
Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, Philly crime stays in Philly.
Right.
DC crime stays in Philly. So even black folks that live in Silver Spring, Maryland, don't have to worry about DC crime. So so they're pretty much contained.
Right.
But these mass shootings, and we had a map up there the week before last, where we showed where all of these mass shootings was taking place, and there was red dots everywhere.
Everywhere, all over the country. I mean, so the idea that as black people we still believe this very racialized idea that in order for us to get justice, in order for us to get what we deserve, not what we want, but what we deserve from the government we pay taxes to, we all of us, all 43 million of us, give or take some, all 43 million of us have to behave perfectly. We still believe that. Many of us still believe that. But white people don't. White people look at, when we're watching the news locally here and someone shoots someone and shoots somebody and kills them here and there. What do we always do? We're sitting there watching the news and they say, "Oh, there's a shooting," and we're like, "Oh, please God, don't let him be black. Please don't let him be black. Please don't let him be black." And then when they are, we're like, "Dang it!
Yeah.
Just dang it!
No.
Did you have to?" White people don't have that reaction when they're watching the news and they hear about a shooting. What many of them think is, "I bet you they were black. Bet you they're black."
But it also goes within the mentality of when you know that you're a part of this, you don't have those hang-ups. See, when you know that this is your country, that and by you see, there's a certain expectation or entitlement, I should say. There's a certain entitlement that white people have, and rightfully so, of what it means to be an American. And what it means, and what you expect out of your government, out of your country, what you expect, that type of entitlement, just based upon the fact that you're an American citizen.
Right.
You don't have to be born here. Immigrants, for the most part, even African immigrants, when they come here, there's a certain type of entitlement. Oh, I am now an American, and this is my Bill of Rights, and this is what I'm supposed to get. Black Americans have yet to feel a part of, and because we were made to feel that way.
Right.
So Black Americans, for the most part, still have yet to buy into this notion that, okay, I'm an American citizen, and and this is, and I'm entitled to this. I'm entitled to feel safe. I'm entitled for my government to intervene and help us deal with this.
Right.
I'm entitled to this, so I expect this. And the fact of feeling connected to Americanness, feeling connected to not only to Americanness, but the values of America, and connected to the whole American mythos and all this stuff, means that, yeah, these white guys could commit all these crimes, and it doesn't have anything to do with me, because the mentality, my perception of what it means to be American, and that my orientation in this country has not been guilt by association.
Exactly.
So that's not part of my makeup. That's not part of my orientation in this society.
As a white person.
As a white person. But black people and others, I guess Native Americans and even Hispanics have experienced this. And, every non-white, let's say this, non-white group has had to, at one point, deal with this thing of, that we're not really seen as Americans, and so we're still trying to prove ourselves here. Right. And so it's the responsibility of everyone in the group to prove to the majority that we have a stake in this, that we belong in this, and that we will that we will hold sacred what these American ideas and values are. And if one of y'all Negroes mess with that, then you're going to set us back.
Right.
You
messed it up for all of us.
You never hear any white group. Now, maybe that was said of white immigrants during the great periods of immigration to this country, when you had immigrant groups that were establishing themselves there, and maybe that kind of mentality was there. That's the reason why Italians would anglicize their names and all this stuff. So it was a degree of that. But eventually those groups were assimilated. And so there was no more that need to feel that, okay, we need to behave ourselves because, we want to be a part of this great experiment.
Right.
We want to be part of this. But when it comes to African Americans, even though we were here longer than many of those immigrant groups that had came after us, there was never this effort on the part of the larger society to not only assimilate us in when we were trying, but to even, not just the assimilation, but even to give us the assurances, because even now, I mean, we talk about the fact that our rights and our station, our status in this society is still tenuous. That's the reason why a civil rights bill has to be revisited. That's the reason why they have to revisit a voting right. Well, if I have a stake in this, if I have a part in this, then it should be, then the argument should be settled.
Exactly.
But that's so white Americans, especially now, after the great immigration and remember now, what also helped these other immigrant groups to be able to be assimilated and to have a stake in this is the fact that certain European groups were designated white, which previously wasn't done. Right. So now it was like, okay, y'all part of the club, because white is a racial construct, and racism is a construct. So now it was like, all right, y'all part of the club, I mean, look how many Irish were hated when they got here.
Exactly.
Italians that were hated,
Right.
So now all of a sudden it got to a point where it was like, you're part of the club. Here's your white stamp. Boom. But but Black Americans, believe it or not, who was trying to go for the white stamp. Because remember now, and me and my brother go back and forth with this Moorish American stuff about this white stuff. But remember now, we know that white is a construct. So it didn't matter what you look like. What it mattered was if you got that white stamp.
Right.
That meant that you was part of the club. So it didn't matter what you looked like because you had Sicilians that was dark as you and me.
Exactly.
But they were considered white.
But right. So and I'm glad you brought that up, because then that brings up another ridiculous argument that we have, that we buy into, the idea that because race is a construct, it's not real. There's no biological basis for this construct called race. Then, in order to address racism, all you have to do is stop recognizing race. I mean,
Morgan Freeman, stop talking about it. That's all. Stop talking about it.
I don't care if the construct that was devised was to call people who look like me and you luscious chocolate drops. It doesn't matter what the construct was called. It doesn't matter that the construct was constructed or devised in some person's mind. The fact is, people were treated differently under the law and according to societal norms and practices because of the negative association with that construct. So even if you you shout to the rooftops that this thing that we created all these laws on, this thing that we told you we told you that this is why these people should be treated that way, none of those reasons we told you to do these things were true. After a generation or so, the behavior, the viewpoint, the stereotypes, the perspective of those people and their descendants, that doesn't change.
And and just to give give a back up what I said about the construct and how white is a club. When during apartheid South Africa, and it happened here too, but during apartheid South Africa, if you and I traveled to South Africa, because it had apartheid laws, we were given honorary white status where we weren't subjected to apartheid.
Really?
Like the Native Africans. So if you and I, as dark as we are, if we went there during the 80s, or sometime during the apartheid period, and we were American citizens, we would be given honorary white status in order to move around in that country because we weren't considered black South Africans. But America did the same thing with Africans who would come here to study during the time of Jim Crow. So you would have Africans who would come here and they were treated differently than the African Americans, or we was called Negroes then. So we know that these type of constructs exist where if they really wanted to let you into the club, it didn't matter what your color was. You and I go to South Africa during the 80s in the apartheid area, and we'd be honorary whites. So that means we wouldn't be subjected to the harsh apartheid rule. We might get dirty looks, but once they hear us speak and say, "Oh, well, they're Americans," our Americanness was our whiteness.
Wow.
So so that's the reason why you would have a lot, and it's a mentality. But that was the reason why even in this country, during the time of immigration and groups, even European groups that were marginalized, that was one of the ways that America absorbed them. Just make them white.
So, I mean, we don't, like we said, we don't want to keep you long,
yeah,
especially since we apologize that we didn't have Kali Akuno tonight. There was a scheduling conflict. We are going to keep trying to get him on because from a political perspective, from the perspective of the history of black struggle, and from what the left or progressives or whatever the heck we're going to be calling ourselves, I don't even know anymore, calling ourselves from now on, the story of Cooperation Jackson, the Jackson Kush plan, and the mayoral candidacy of Antar Lumumba and his son Chokwe Lumumba are incredibly important as a blueprint. We believe a blueprint for what progressives need to do going forward if we really want to win. If you're talking about revolution, this is the plan. This is part of the blueprint. So we do want to make sure that we get him on the show, and we're going to keep trying. His schedule, obviously, since they just won the election, they got a lot going on down there in Jackson, Mississippi, very busy. But these conversations that we have about history, and the history of black struggle and the history of where we are today in America, whenever people see that we're going to be talking about black stuff, right? They're always just like, oh my God, again with the black stuff. But unless you understand how our struggle in this country relates to how non-black people gained the political and social capital that they have, we're never going to get past dismantling this beast called white supremacy, which is this current administration really is just the natural next step in the white supremacist experiment. It really is, because we've refused to pay attention to precisely how we got here. And that's what we strive to do. So, this horrendous shooting, this horrendous terrorist attack by this guy,
by this WhiSIS member.
By this WhiSIS member yesterday. Yeah, it's not a lone wolf. It's not a mental illness issue. America doesn't have a lone wolf mental illness problem. America has a white radical rabid wolf pack problem.
Yep.
That's what America has. And you can't understand that if you don't understand the history of racism in this country and how issues within the two groups, socially made up construct though they may be, how issues within the two groups are treated very, very differently, and why that's done. Why it's done. That's what we don't do enough.
We don't do that enough.
And I think that's what we try to do.
We allow politicians to take over the narratives. We allow politicians to take over the discussions, and they politicize it.
Right.
And so, we don't have a chance to take it out of the political arena in order to have common sense, practical, human solutions.
Right. Exactly. So, thank you for joining us on this Wednesday edition of Live in Luqman Nation. We will be live on Sunday at 6 p.m. Join us then. In the meantime, share this video, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter. You can look for us on all platforms and on Periscope and on Instagram. I keep forgetting Instagram. More pictures of our dog than anything else. But he's a Luqman too. But you can find us on all platforms under Luqman Nation, LuqManNation. Our GoFundMe for supporting us in producing our first documentary is available. We will provide you with a link. We got a lot of stuff to do for that between now and the release of that documentary. A lot of stuff we have to do. So we really appreciate your support. Please also consider supporting us through monthly support on Patreon or one-time donation, like I said, through GoFundMe. Thank you all for joining us tonight on Live in Luqman Nation. This is Jackie Luqman.
And I'm at this Shahid Luqman giving you the Brezhnev wave.
the Brezhnev.
We'll explain that later.
Thank y'all so much. Have a good night. Be really good to each other. Peace.